Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. You can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 163 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on what are 2 new treatments for PTSD. And it is Friday the 29th of July 2022 as I record this. So in today's podcast episode, we're looking at 2 really fascinating brand new therapies, which I really did enjoy learning about. That because of PTSD, it's an awful connotation, but as a current or future psychologist, is our job to help treat it and to help these people manage their psychological distress and improve their lives. So today's podcast episode that focuses on these 2 brand new treatments is really, really interesting, so I cannot recommend it enough. So that's coming up later on. But moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest because they've updated their website and they're now sending out new stories. So the first one is, helicopter parents also support parentistic social policies. Parenting styles clearly speak to some degree about the way we see the world, what we value, and our past experiences. Now, a new study has linked parenting styles to beliefs about how governments and society should work. Writing in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Christian Linke and Daniel Oppertom find that proponents of helicopter parents also support parentistic policies. So the reason why this is a good one to look at isn't so much because of the actual findings that were about the parents supporting parentalistic social policies though, but I rather like it because it does show and it's another example of how developmental psychology from us wanting to support our child's development and our social experiences, for example how we see the world, which is also more cognitive psychology is all work on buttons to affect our overall behaviour. So the second one is to stimulate people's curiosity in a topic, explain how it benefits society. Okay. There's a simple way to boost curiosity in a topic, and if you're a teacher or a lecturer or parent who would like their kids to engage with science, it could be helpful to know, according to a new work in cognition, simply presenting people with interesting facts isn't enough to really drive a desire to know more, but stressing that facts are useful, not necessarily to them personally, but to society in general, stimulates significantly more curiosity. Yeah. Now this one is a really interesting one, because I didn't really twig it until I've just looked at it, but it turns out that I also do similar stuff because whenever I'm talking about stuff, very nice situations, or whether it's ecology or another topic, I also tend to focus on the bigger picture and not necessarily just interesting facts though, because interesting facts, but they are interesting, but at the end of the day, they're not that useful. But some guessing though, but that's why in some podcast episodes, I do focus on how does this apply to society and even yourselves though, because learning about psychology is great and all, but unless we can actually apply it, it's not that useful and therefore it's not that interesting. The last one is, massive study finds no link between time spent playing video games and well-being, and this we've mentioned on the podcast quite a bit. Video games are perhaps one of the most politicised forms of entertainment media out there. In the decades since they were first created, governments, politicians, health bodies and beyond have voiced concerns that the amount of time some players spend in these virtual worlds could be detrimental to their mental health. And I would also like to jump in here that all the people, or to be honest, the good majority, actually have absolutely no training in mental health. Despite all of this concern, there's been a lack of high-quality research in the effects of video games on players' well-being. To remedy this, Matty Thom and their colleagues at the University of Oxford, in collaboration with several large game publishers like Nintendo and Square X, conducted an ambitious longitudinal study. these fears they conclude in the new paper are unfounded. So to be honest, none of this is surprising whatsoever, because I know somewhere between episode 91 and somewhere between episode 99, or just somewhere about that. I know that on the podcast, what we did was that we did a developmental psychology podcast episode that actually focused on a screen time, which actually tackled this quite a bit of depth, and we've also covered it on different psychology news sections. Research shows though is that playing video games is not detrimental. Of course, though, you still need to live a balanced life, so you do actually need to get outside and to see other people in the real world. But video games, with the chances of it destroying your life and being really detrimental to your mental health is, as these papers said, unfounded. So I hope you enjoy the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. This week I've been doing quite a lot of different things, including some more research in that forensic psychology. But I've now done the research into terrorism and hostage taking. Taking them, and I'm really looking forward to actually writing up that book in a future. But right now, though, I'm actually focusing on the forensic psychology behind the false allegations, and that is really, really interesting. Personally, I thought it was going to be a bit dull when I first started researching it, but it's absolutely fascinating. And it's a bit tragic because, of course, most of the false allegation research will tend to focus on sexual abuse and false rape allegations, and actually why people like to do it. But it's really interesting now. So I've not been done a great amount of research this week because I've been snowed under with tons of other projects, but I will finish it up next week, I hope. But something else that I really wanted to actually talk about, which actually connects to forensic psychology, is actually something that happened in the UK this week, because for the first time ever though, but TV cameras have actually been allowed to film sentencing decisions in the UK and in actual courts. So what this means is that after a trial and when a criminal is actually sentenced, in that sort of media broadcasters are getting a 8-page, or to be honest, a really short, really redacted version of the judge's sentencing decisions. But what actually happens now, though, is that every media broadcasters actually get to film all of it. And the case yesterday, I will not go into it because of how graphic it is for the podcast though, because it did talk about a lot of child abuse, child pornography, etc., and sexual abuse allegations. But the reason why I'm actually talking about it on the podcast is that me and my mum, but we watched the full 20 minutes of the judge explaining the decision making it. And one of the reasons why the broadcasters actually campaigned for the government to allow them to do this is because broadcasters wanted to help teach people how the legal system actually worked. And as someone who actually loves forensic psychology, and I've actually mentioned this repeatedly on the podcast and in different books, this is actually critical. People that don't do psychology, they are brilliant, and I have tons of non-psychology friends. Again, but because they don't work and because they don't learn about the criminal justice system, they have such a false idea of it. Though, because the members of my family, they absolutely hate the idea of insanity defense or the legal argument behind the diminished responsibility, which is where, to grossly oversimplify it, if you have a mental health condition, that they believe that automatically gets you off, and that's completely wrong. But of course, it actually doesn't work like that, because if someone actually says the argument that is that they are unfit to stand trial, a trial though, but then they are grilled, they are interrogated by psychologists, and basically people people do try to rip the defense apart. Because if everyone with a mental health condition actually starts using the defense, then the defense becomes meaningless for people who actually can't stand trial, right, because of their lack of mental abilities, etc. But what this 20 minutes of actually broadcasting the sentencing decision actually does, though, is that it actually shows us people how complex, how in depth, and actually and actually how thorough the criminal justice system is, though, like when it comes out to the offences and when it actually comes to mental health. Though, so I'm like all for it. And to be honest, I think that this is actually going to be such a valuable tool to actually teach people how the criminal justice system actually works, and most importantly, that mental health, diminished responsibility, etc., are not really easy defences that anyone can actually use, though, because that's something that really annoys me about the people towards forensic psychology, because there's just no respect because people believe in all of these myths. And as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment on the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi Whiteley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel like a conversation. And whilst I remember about a comment from my recent episodes, I really want to thank Tamari Johnson. Sorry if I said your name wrong, because she said, I love your ebooks. I found your resources relevant and reliable for my papers at Campbell University. Thank you for all of your content as a fellow psychologist in clinical studies. So a massive thank you to Marva for that lovely message, because I really do love hearing from all of you. And today's episode has been sponsored by Cognitive Psychology, a guide to neuropsychology, neuroscience, and cognitive psychology. So this is a great sponsor for today's episode because PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, really does focus on cognitive changes, cognition, and perception. And this really great, really easy to understand book that goes into so much depth. For example, it goes into stuff like memory, thinking, attention, and a lot more newer topics. For example, like vision, dementia, and so many brand new topics that other editions haven't. So if you like today's episode and you want to get a really good deep understanding of cognitive psychology, definitely check out this great book. So it's available at all the major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore, and the local library if you request it. So that's enough of the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be looking at what are two neuropsychological treatments for post-traumatic stress disorder. And because this is a bit of a longer podcast episode today, I'm actually just going to dive straight into it. A brief introduction to post-traumatic stress disorder. I suspect that the vast majority of us already have a passing surface level knowledge of what a PTSD is from our studies, but in case you don't, or in case you've forgotten now, which is perfectly fine, believe me, PTSD is a mental health condition that develops in a person after experiencing a traumatic event, like being in a war zone or seeing a murder, as well as it is characterized by intrusive thoughts, reliving the event again and again, and impairs a person's ability to function. However, there are now newly emerging therapies for PTSD coming out of research, and that's the focus of today's episode. Stanil ganglion block therapy for PTSD. The first therapy we'll look at works in a rather interesting way because this treatment involves having an injection into a person's neck, resulting in calming the part of the brain system that the traumatic event has caused to become overreactive. Even more interestingly, results from research have been impressive enough that there are now more than 50 treatment centres that perform this sort of therapy across the United States where this treatment is done. As well as always, there is a list of references and studies right at the bottom of the blog post. In addition, some PTSD sufferers who have had the treatment thankfully reported that they've had a better sleep, decreases in panic attacks, depression, and anxiety, feeling less nervous or jumpy, having the ability to connect with others again, improvements in sexual function and intimacy, better concentration and memory. And before we move on to the next type of therapy, I wanted to quickly throw in my personal thoughts on the therapy. This seems great, and I'm pleased for the PTSD sufferers that the treatment seems to be working very well. However, my problem with this therapy is that it's a bit biomedical model, and it fails to address the psychological aspects of PTSD, since all you're really doing is treating the biological aspects of the condition. And yes, this will have a knock-on effects for the psychological aspects. But I feel like this is just too the reductionist and biomedical model for my personal liking. And yet, as I said, I'm pleased that this is working. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy. The second treatment we'll be looking at doesn't come from or target PTSD specifically due to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Therapy uses a pure oxygen to speed up a person's healing, and it is often used for different conditions like gangrene and decompression sickness, leading to the question of whether it can work for people with PTSD. It turns out that researchers at Israel's Tel Aviv University and Shemra Medical Center studied brain scans of Israeli soldiers that had wartime traumas resulting in PTSD, as well as the scans as reported in the journal PLOS1 demonstrated physical damage in the frontal lobe regions and hippocampus. Therefore, showing that PTSD has an organic brain damage component that of the course talking therapies can be very ineffective. As a result, oxygen therapies are argued to be able to effectively treat PTSD brain damage because there is a clear need for a physical healing of the emotional wounds. Furthermore, the references for the study form of this study is below, but in one study involving 65 war veterans with major PTSD, their before and after brain scans showed major improvements in both the frontal lobe and hippocampus because of this new therapy. But the study was small, and of course a lot more research is needed to confirm the therapy's effectiveness. Yet it still shows that the results for the therapy are promising. The way how hyperbaric treatment works is by increasing the supply of oxygen to the brain to activate the creation of new neurons as well as blood vessels. Then the oxygen infusion reactivates the brain's stem cells and causes them to grow more or proliferate, if we're being technical. Also, but the oxygen stimulates the production of new vessels, which is thought to result in an increase in brain activity and restore the normal functioning of the wounded brain tissues as well. Finally, these treatments are done in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, where the atmospheric pressure is higher than sea level pressure, and the air is thick with oxygen. Again, before we move on, I wanted to throw my own thoughts in here. And as always, I absolutely love the great new innovative ways how new therapies can get created. It is great that we're looking at two biomedical treatments as well as psychological treatments for PTSD, because psychological treatments clearly cannot fill every gap in PTSD treatment. However, there is still a lot of importance for psychotherapy, and it still has a critical role to play in the treatment of PTSD. Why is psychotherapy still vital for PTSD? I seriously couldn't blame you if you're wondering what's the point of psychotherapy for PTSD when we have these two great new treatments for the condition. However, psychotherapy is still a critical form of PTSD treatment, because during and after these new treatments, psychotherapy is vital to enhancing the treatment's success. For example, individual psychotherapy is a vital form of PTSD sufferers, since PTSD generates habits that don't disappear on their own, and it is important for PTSD sufferers to understand what's happened to them so that they can discuss their painful experiences, hopefully resulting in the shame and the guilt associated with them can now go away or dissipate. This is often done through cognitive behavioral therapy, which can accelerate the change back from PTSD-based beliefs and reactions to normal, healthy and functional responses to the stresses of everyday life. Family therapy is another vital psychotherapy in PTSD treatment because it's important to be treating the secondary PTSD that the family members suffer from, including children. Due to it's important for everyone to understand the causes, symptoms, and hopeful cures of PTSD, to decrease the negative impact of the emotional outbursts and tensions that PTSD causes within a family to decrease. Lastly, a couple therapy can be critical in the healing process of romantic relationships, especially if they have been harmed by PTSD-related anger and outbursts, as well as couples need stronger skills for handling these difficult conversations, like clearing up any resentment they have towards each other created by PTSD's impact on quickness to anger and irritability. Thankfully, guidance from an effective couples therapist can speed up the healing of attachment between the partners. And if this isn't done, then any anger or irritated outburst from a PTSD sufferers can do a lot of damage and harm to their marital bond. Conclusion. PTSD isn't a pleasant condition in the slightest, and as a current or future psychologist, it is our job to help support everyone with mental health conditions. So by this way, it's so critical to keep learning, studying, and creating new treatments, so we can try to help everyone we possibly can. And whilst a stellar ganglion blocker may be available right now for a lot of people, hyperbaric oxygen treatment is still in the research phase for PTSD, but thankfully it's widely used for a lot of other conditions. Yet the point is still clear. If you or someone that you know or love has PTSD, then there is a lot of hope for the future. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you got some out of it. I know that I did, and I always do like to be helping to push the boundaries, and most importantly, let all of us get really informed about the advancements that are going on. So if you know someone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help us spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, then definitely check out Cognitive Psychology, a guide to neuropsychology, neuroscience, and cognitive psychology, especially if you want to learn a lot more about today's podcast episode. But if you didn't want to buy a book, be someone to give the podcast a bit of one-time support, then you can now buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.